Town Centre. And by Scarborough Town Centre, Robert will be happy to hear me refer to that. I'm referring less to the commercial concern there and more to the centre of Scarborough, the sort of economic, retail, commercial, library, community, civic centre, that part of the, but I'll call it the Scarborough Town Centre. The subway will go there. It will be accompanied by a new north-south spine in the form of SmartTrack, and it will have, for the same money, it will have an LRT that services the University of Toronto Scarborough campus and parts in between. Now, I think that even today, before lunch, and I say this with no offense to the people I was having chats with, we were getting involved in discussions before lunch that said, well, we really shouldn't have any LRTs, we should just have subways. Or, we should have an LRT instead of a subway and have no subways because there's not justification for a subway. Or we should have SmartTrack but not a subway. Or subways but no SmartTrack. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, we've got bogged down in what I call these false choices for years and years now. These are sort of polarized debates that don't take account of the fact that a true optimized transit plan in any part of the city, including Scarborough, requires us to use every form of transportation, every mode of transport we've got. Heavy rail in the form of SmartTrack, an extension of the Bloor-Danforth subway line to the Scarborough Town Centre, LRTs, which are going to serve several of our neighbourhood improvement areas and the U of T Scarborough campus, and bus routes. We've restored quite a few bus routes. I didn't bring the exact number in my head with me, but quite a few in Scarborough, like 66 across the city, that were cut under the previous administration. The lifeblood of the transit system that connects people in their neighbourhoods to higher order transit, they were cut and they've been restored. And this plan overall that involves every one of those modes of transit, heavy rail, subway, LRT, buses, and heaven knows I could talk about bicycles and pedestrians too, but I won't get into that here today. These plans taken together provide dramatically improved transit for Scarborough because it is not about one project or one line or one mode of transit. The city needs to be building in Scarborough and across the city an entire network of public transportation that includes all modes of transit, and we have to wrap our minds around the fact that it is just not realistic, nor is it going to solve the problem to focus in on any one form of transit or any one line as being the be-all and end-all that is going to solve all of the problems. We are working in Scarborough towards a network, and the network is based on how people actually live and work in Scarborough, not based on some kind of polarized or ideological choice that people are making, because I think it is a false choice. We're talking about the realities of those people getting to and from work, to and from the library, to and from school, to and from shopping, the realities of how they live. And I think one of the last slides I'm going to put up is one that is going to interest you in terms of actual research that determines how people use public transportation in Scarborough, because I think you'll see the results will be different than you might think. And why is transit important at all? Well, I've mentioned it at the outset, but you know, many of the people, especially in this room, know that transit drives development. It drives the location of people's businesses. It drives a lot of things that have to do with the creation of neighbourhoods and centres of commerce and centres of community activity. And the new network that you see here in Scarborough, and it's only showing you that part, we'll put up one in a minute that shows you the whole city, is about moving the most people possible with the funding that has been committed to Scarborough. And what we've now done, and you'll be pleased to know we've done this, and I've done it with my friend Brad Dogood and others from the provincial government, and with my friends from the federal government, is we have taken the money that we had committed to Scarborough and we're getting more for that money. We're getting more for that money. So for the same money that was committed previously to the Scarborough subway alone, we now have a Scarborough subway to the civic heart of Scarborough and an LRT that is going to serve a whole bunch of neighbourhoods and a whole bunch of people in this part of the city. You know, when we come down to this debate that still goes on about whether we should extend the Bloor-Danforth subway into Scarborough or not, or further into Scarborough or not, I simply pose this question to you. It was my political mentor and friend, Bill Davis, who built the RT many years ago as a demonstration project for a form of transit they were trying to sell around the world at that time. And that's fine. They did that in good faith. But I ask you this simple question. Had that RT never been built, do you think by now we would have extended the Bloor-Danforth subway to the Scarborough Town Centre? And the answer is, of course we would have done it, and we would have done it a long time ago. And so the notion that this is still such a big debating point, that you would have a subway connection to the heart of this part of Toronto with the 625,000 people and all the businesses and all the jobs, to me is a debate that shouldn't continue. It is something that it is the only civic centre in the city of Toronto that does not have a higher order transit connection to its core, and it is something that is going to spur development, that is going to spur more jobs and more people, and it is something that would have been done a long time ago were it not for what I'll call the aberration of an RT being built off the then end of the Scarborough subway. And besides which, I would say to you that it'll stimulate a lot of decision-making, including on the part of people like myself and my colleagues, I hope, on City Council. I would like to convince them that that subway will provide the last piece of justification that's needed, because there are already quite a few others, as to why we couldn't have a city government building in the Scarborough Civic Centre precinct that houses a lot of civic employees. We have the Civic Centre there today, but why couldn't we have more people in what I will refer to as being the well-transit served after this, and frankly less expensive part of the city in which to operate compared to all of the jobs, or many of them, being downtown? Why couldn't there be a new hospital here? I mean, we've heard about that and the report that's meant to lead to a new hospital, or expanded retail, which I'm sure is in the plans that Robert and his colleagues have. And so I want to get ahead with this, and I want to get ahead with the extension of both the subway and the Crosstown Rapid Transit project from Kennedy to the University of Toronto Scarborough campus up Kingston Road, because that too, the University and Centennial College, they represent significant areas of future growth for Scarborough and future talent coming out of Scarborough and future educational opportunity for young people in Scarborough and across the city. So there you have, the optimized network that shows you the subway and the LRT. I'm sorry I don't have a pointer or one of those lasers that I can help you with, but it shows you the subway in green. And of course, I'm the least reliable guy to be telling you that now, because I just admitted that I can't see past the end of my nose. But I'm familiar enough with these drawings because I look at them almost every day. But this diagram is about more transit for the same money, and more transit that is going to get approved, I believe, by the consensus of City Council, and bring to an end for once and for all those kinds of polarized, repetitious debates that have gone on and on and on, where we change course as often as we change our socks. And I think this is going to create the foundation of a strong network, one that feeds into the larger city system, along with expanded TTC bus service and SmartTrack local service on the existing GO train tracks. SmartTrack is an essential part of this, and it's the blue line that runs up through north-south, principally north-south there. It forms a new north-south transit spine in Scarborough, and it will be fed by east-west bus services. I was explaining to some of the people that I was having chats with before lunch that now one of the examples that was given to me is somebody who has to take the Ellesmere bus and commute, and a long commute they have to go downtown. And that's because they have to go all the way across to Yonge Street and down. There's two things that does. It makes the commute very lengthy, and secondly, of course, it adds to the existing overcrowding, or contributes to the existing overcrowding of the Yonge Street subway line. And lest you think that it's just something that somebody's made up or an occasional story in the news, there are people on a daily basis now that have to wait 4 and 5 trains to go by before they can even get on to go downtown. This is no way to be running a transit system, and SmartTrack, it has been shown by the expert studies, not by me because I do believe in it, but by the expert studies, that it will result in a substantial double-digit relief offered as soon as it starts to operate, because the Ellesmere bus will run to the SmartTrack station. Somebody can get on the SmartTrack train, and if they're going downtown, go downtown on a relatively express basis compared to what they have to do now. So now we come to the citywide map, which is even more confusing in some respects, but there's a lot of this that's already being done. You can see the Eglinton Crosstown there, you can see the subway extension, you can see SmartTrack again running up the right-hand side, you can see the extension to the York University Spadina subway that are all on there. Eastern service extending the Shepherd line is included as well. And what we're looking at finally, I think, in this city, based on a plan that came not from, some of the ideas in it came from different people who were in public office, but by and large, this is a plan that is now incorporated in a report written by our city's chief planner and by the other transit experts based on evidence that they brought forward with respect to not just ridership, because Sometimes we get bogged down in saying every decision should be made exclusively on the basis of ridership. But it is based on a whole series of facts they looked at and planning considerations. And for the first time, I think we will actually have a plan that I think is going to have the agreement of the three governments and can actually proceed to look like something more similar to what you see in other major cities. It's aspirational in the sense that it's something that's going to take time. I know at the public meeting I attended the other night here in Scarborough, where people were giving their views about these transit plans, when they heard in some cases these things are going to take 8 years, or in the case of the relief line that's also shown there, it's going to take 13 years. People sigh a little bit about that, but at the end of the day, if you think it through, and many of you I've met before lunch are involved in some way in construction and other things like that, you understand you have to go through environmental assessments, which are necessary, design periods, cost estimations, the procurement process to decide who builds it and how they build it, and then the actual construction period. And so when you think it through, it actually makes sense that when you're digging a lot of tunnels, say across Eglinton right now, that line has been underway for several years and won't be finished until 2021. That's just how long it takes. But thank goodness it's underway. And that's the other good news that I bring you today, because we did report this to the people at the Scarborough meeting the other night, is that there are parts of this project, this overall project here, that are underway, like the Crosstown Express line. It's being built today. On SmartTrack, the double tracking of the line from Milliken to Agincourt is being built today. It's being done now by Metrolinx. If you went up there, you'll see construction actually happening with the second phase from Agincourt to, I think, Kennedy, or the second phase south from Agincourt, to happen shortly thereafter in calendar 2016. These things are happening. Other things, like the relief line, are in earlier stages. So you'll see a report coming out tomorrow that talks about that the city government, through the planning department, has actually identified a proposed route for it, which represents significant progress going forward. But that's the first stages of what is a 13-year project. And that's how long it takes to do all of these things. Now, I mentioned earlier on that I was going to show you a map that you'd find interesting. And I don't know if you can read it, and I can't read it, so I'm really in trouble, but I think I remember the numbers fairly well. What it shows is how people use transit in Scarborough, and the number on the right, I think I'm somebody with better eyesight than me, I think the balloon that's on the right says 48%, is that right? 48% of all transit trips taken in Scarborough are taken within Scarborough. So again, for those who sort of suggest somehow that our priority should be exclusively on transit that sort of leads to downtown or is connected to downtown, half the people that are using transit in Scarborough aren't going downtown. They're going somewhere else in Scarborough. They're going to Centennial. They're going to University of Toronto Scarborough campus. They're going to the Scarborough Town Centre. And so this underlines the importance not only of the bus service that I talked about restoring, but also of something like the LRT. Because the LRT is going to pass through neighborhoods where people, frankly, are probably going to be better and bigger users of public transportation to connect them to education or to a job or just to retail to go shopping. And so that's a sort of fact number one that I think is most interesting about how people use transit. And by the way, those numbers would be very different in other parts of the city. But it's the first thing that came out of the expert evidence put together not by some political propaganda artist, but by people in our planning department. These are people staying inside Scarborough to do most of what they do. And I think it shows you that you can't address the needs of all of those people with any one single project. Then there's, and again, I'm going to step over here to actually read the numbers, or Glenn, you can read them for me. What's the one say about the people that are going downtown, the one that's the lower of the left-hand boxes? 23% are people who are going downtown. And so they are in need of connections, plural, downtown, which are both going to provide them with the connections they need that presently don't exist right out into Scarborough in the truest sense of the word, and they will have two ways to go. One is via the Bloor-Danforth subway, which isn't going to be for everybody, because that does involve going all the way across Bloor-Danforth, and of course then you get to Yonge Street again and become part of that overcrowded situation. So they will have an alternative, which is SmartTrack, that will take them down into the downtown core. And again, a lot of people work and invest there. And then the remainder of the people are going other places. And of course, the objective of this overall plan over time is going to make sure that people have those connections, whether they're going north into some other part of the city and north into the west, and so on. This is a giant piece of the city with immense potential. You know that. That lies behind the very thinking that's brought this group together and that lies behind your program of activity. But you also know that development around the city core of Scarborough has been stalled since the 1990s. I think we've got to be honest about these things. And I try, no matter what else I do, you won't always agree with me, and I've got some tough things going on in the city right now that I, together with my colleagues, am responsible for. But I can tell you what, I'm always going to be honest with you, because there is no point in being otherwise. And it has stalled here. It has stalled here. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with here. In fact, there's a lot of things right here. But one of the things we didn't do is make these investments in transit, actually agree on a plan, and move forward. And I think that this kind of investment can bring about real change in